Well, what's wrong with Eskom's strategy? Hennie Steyn is director of the Xaris Group. He's with us in studio. We had a very interesting story this morning on Biz News where the Germans are starting to pack up power plants that are no longer viable in Germany and exporting them to developing countries at a fraction of the price, shipping included, they say. I guess in a South African context, we haven't been too good at buying other people's power plants. We like to do it all ourselves, yet it hasn't been working that well. When you have a look at the South African energy situation, given what your company does, are you seeing some real sore thumbs that can be addressed?
I think the important thing is the policy that governs power in South Africa is where the major problem sits. There's very little movement and room for private entities to actually participate in.
Even still,
Yeah.
I thought that was all. Although Business Day had a story this morning. Was that accurate? That government's now moving away from
I haven't read
public-private
the
partnerships?
article this morning, but I can tell you this: it's very difficult as an IPP or independent power producer to step up to the challenge and start producing power in South Africa. And I think South Africa needs to do a bit more to open up the doors. That's why we're looking at other countries as well in Africa, like Namibia, Tanzania and Kenya. All of them has been focusing significantly in terms of liberalizing or opening up their networks, the transmission networks, so that private money can actually participate in that.
It's quite interesting you say that, because this morning we had Group 5 bringing out a trading update in which they did really poorly. But the good news is they're building a $400 million power plant in Ghana. Now, they have the expertise to do that. You would
Yes.
wonder why they wouldn't be doing it here.
Well, I think the opportunities are outside South Africa at the moment, and I think most of the EPC companies like Group 5 focus on that, make sure that they can actually reap them in. The same with Namibia.
But why aren't they doing it here? What's stopping them from?
I think there's a bit of a shortfall at the moment, and I know that Department of Energy is working pretty hard in changing that. But you need to open up the market. There's no way to move into the market and start producing power and put it into your grid system. It's a long process. South Africa's got an extensive process and lots of regulations, rules. I think partly because they've had a strategy for a long term where they actually built major plants, whereas they should have actually allowed to go smaller, have more and more competitors playing in this field.
Why?
I think it
I don't
was
mean
part
why
of,
they should bring competitors in, but why have they gone the route they have?
I think it was part of the social engineering part. It was good at the time. Remember what hits us now is 10 years old. It happened 10 years ago. So your decisions that you make in the power industry takes 10 years to actually see the real effect. So from that perspective, I think there needs to be a bit of a movement. I think government needs to step back and say, let's bring the private sector into this, change it.
But is that not happening? I was under the impression that because of the crisis that South Africa's in, new ideas, new thinking is being imposed.
There's lots and lots of new ideas. On the renewable space, there's a lot of plants coming online, but that's not a solution. That's just filling a small gap into it. If you take your larger plants, the big ones that they're constructing now, they're still going to need standby plants. The older plants are becoming more and more outdated. So they need to open up their mindset in terms of bringing smaller plants into the fray, allowing those companies to start operating, putting power into the grid.
Hennie, who's done that successfully in the world?
Well, first of all, Americans has been the leaders in that. Europe, all over Europe is working like that. But if you compare a country like Turkey to South Africa, which is very similar, you'll find that's exactly how it worked. They've been through a process where the grid system is completely independent. So whoever generates power, put it in there, and they sell their power at competitive rates, up to the point now where they're starting bringing big plants into the system. Those plants are taking up the smaller guys, but the smaller guys haven't paid off their plants, so they
the
can
market
move.
is. And why in South Africa, you say we aren't allowed to do that here?
I think it will get there, but I think it's too slow. I think the department has really applied their mind about this, but I think we need to see a bit more aggressive action.
So let's look at the Turks, let's look at other examples around the world and apply it here, and we might not have to go and buy a whole lot of nuclear power plants from Mr. Putin.
Well, nuclear plants is probably 15 to 20 years away from reality. So whoever bargains on that makes a big mistake. I would rather focus on making sure that our assembly of the number of plants that you put into the South African environment is sufficient to cover A, shortages, B, failures, and also growth. You can't build that many big plants at in a period of 10 years. You need to focus on bringing smaller plants into the equation.
That was Hennie Steyn, director of the Xaris Group.